The heavy rain pounded against the windows of the presidential palace in Wakiso. Ibrahim Traoré sat at his mahogany desk, reading through classified documents with intense concentration. The files contained damning evidence: bank statements showing offshore accounts, satellite phone transcripts, and detailed plans for a military coup scheduled for tomorrow night. 17 signatures, Ibrahim whispered to himself, counting the names of his own military commanders who had pledged allegiance to foreign masters. For 90 days, his trusted intelligence team had worked tirelessly, gathering evidence of how external forces were attempting to destabilize Wakiso and seize control of the nation's vast uranium deposits. The operation had been conducted with painstaking secrecy. Every phone tapped, every meeting recorded, every foreign contact noted. Ibrahim checked his watch. The conspirators thought they still had 24 hours to prepare, but they would be met not with success, but with handcuffs. He gazed out at the storm battering the capital city. The dark clouds and lightning seemed an appropriate backdrop for the betrayal he had uncovered. "Captain Osei," Ibrahim called without raising his voice. His intelligence chief stepped forward from a shadowed corner of the office. A woman of remarkable skill and unwavering loyalty, she had been with him since the revolution 3 years ago. "Yes, Mr. President," she replied. "All units are in position. None of the traitors will escape." The air felt electric between them, heavy with the gravity of what they were about to do. Captain Osei was among the few people Ibrahim trusted completely in a world of shifting loyalties. Ibrahim returned to his desk and pressed play on a small digital recorder. Though it pained him to listen, he knew every word by heart now. "Operation begins at 2200 hours. We take the presidential convoy at the eastern checkpoint. Our European friends have extraction teams standing by. After completion, each man receives $75,000 in their accounts. If we fail, our friends in Brussels will provide safe passage and new identities." The voice belonged to General Mbeki, his childhood friend. They had trained together at the military academy, fought side by side against terrorist insurgents in the north, and celebrated when the corrupt regime fell 3 years ago. Now he was selling their country's future for foreign currency. Ibrahim remembered their last mission together just months ago, liberating a village from extremists, sharing water from the same canteen as grateful villagers surrounded them. Mbeki had seemed so sincere in his commitment to Wakiso's future. "Mr. President," Captain Osei said quietly, "you seem remarkably calm for a man who just discovered a plot to assassinate him." Ibrahim slowly sat back in his chair and gazed at the photograph on his desk. The smiling face of Patrice Nyerere, Wakiso's revolutionary hero who had died fighting for independence decades earlier. "Because justice requires clarity, not rage," Ibrahim replied. "My life is secondary, Osei. This nation's sovereignty, the dignity of our people, these are what truly matter." He traced his fingers over Nyerere's photograph, the man who had renamed their nation from Eastern Province to Wakiso, the place of awakening in the local language. The irony wasn't lost on Ibrahim. A sharp knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Major Lumusi, commander of the Presidential Guard, entered, his uniform darkened with rain. "Mr. President, they're moving. General Mbeki and his core team have left the Western Barracks. They're gathering weapons." Ibrahim nodded solemnly. "Begin the operation." In an instant, the room transformed into a command center. Phones rang, radios crackled, and orders were dispatched. Presidential guards silently took their positions. This was the culmination of an operation planned with months of discipline and patience. Outside, the storm continued unabated, masking the sounds of the security operation. The city of Wakiso maintained its evening rhythm. Market vendors closing their stalls, families gathering for dinner, children completing homework by lamplight, unaware of the drama unfolding. Ibrahim watched from the security monitors as raids were conducted simultaneously across military outposts, private residences, and secret meeting points. On one screen, General Mbeki and 4 senior officers were seen approaching a side entrance of the communications center, carrying military-grade weapons. Their faces showed determination and tension. "For Wakiso," Ibrahim whispered. On the screen, the area suddenly filled with loyal security forces. The plotters were surrounded, their weapons clattering to the ground. The shock on Mbeki's face was captured in perfect detail by the security cameras. Not a single shot had been fired. Dawn broke over Wakiso with unusual clarity after the night storm. Ibrahim stood at the National Parade grounds, watching as 17 officers were brought before him, hands bound, their insignia and rank stripped from their uniforms. Behind them, the Wakiso flag, blue, gold, and green with a rising sun, snapped in the morning breeze. Camera crews positioned themselves carefully. This would not merely be a punishment ceremony, but a message to all of Africa and beyond. Ibrahim approached the conspirators, his steps measured and deliberate. He wore a simple military uniform without decoration or special distinction. Nothing should distract from this moment of truth. He stopped before the kneeling men. None could meet his gaze. "What brought you here?" Ibrahim asked, his voice carrying across the silent grounds. Was it money? Promises of power? Or simply cowardice? General Mbeki raised his head slightly, shame and fear battling in his eyes. "Mr. President, we were just—" "I am not your president," Ibrahim interrupted sharply. "I am the voice of the people of Wakiso, and you have betrayed your people." The words hung in the air, cutting deeper than any physical punishment could have. Around them, loyal soldiers stood at attention, their faces showing a complex mixture of disappointment and resolve. Many had served alongside these traitors, shared meals and stories with them. An aide handed Ibrahim a thick file. He opened it, the pages fluttering in the morning breeze. "General Mbeki, on March 7th, you met with Director Fournier of French intelligence at a hotel in Geneva. You were offered $350,000 and accepted." Mbeki's face paled. Nobody was supposed to know this. It was impossible. His eyes darted around, perhaps searching for the source of the leak. "Colonel Adebayo, in the past 4 months, €225,000 were deposited into your Cayman Islands account. The funds were routed through 8 shell companies, but originated from a special operations fund connected to the British Foreign Office. Every name, every figure, every secret meeting, all meticulously documented. The conspirators' faces had lost all color. How had they been so thoroughly monitored? Ibrahim continued down the list, methodically exposing each betrayal, each conspiracy. When he finished, he closed the file and turned to address the crowd of soldiers, journalists, and the millions of Wakiso citizens watching the live broadcast. The cameras captured his face, calm but resolute, a leader forced to confront treason within his own ranks. "Look carefully, my friends," he said, raising his voice to carry across the grounds. "These are the tools of those who wish to continue exploiting Africa. Our brothers, our sons, bought with foreign money, manipulated by foreign promises, used for foreign interests." Angry murmurs rose from the crowd. Mothers who had sent their sons to serve the nation with pride now wept at this betrayal. Veterans bearing scars from the independence struggle shook their heads in disbelief. Ibrahim raised his hand, and a hush fell over the assembly. "But today, we send a message to them and their masters. Wakiso is not for sale. Africa's dignity is not negotiable. And betrayal." He paused, looking directly at Mbeki. "Betrayal always carries a price." The sun now stood directly overhead, bathing the parade ground in harsh light. Heat waves rose from the pavement, but nobody moved, transfixed by the unfolding drama. Ibrahim approached the conspirators again. Some flinched, perhaps expecting physical retribution. Instead, he spoke in a voice so quiet that the microphones barely captured it. "We will not execute you," he said, "because we are not like them." Justice holds more value than vengeance. The words seemed to confuse the traitors. In the brutal logic of coups and counter-coups, blood typically answered blood. This measured response was unexpected. With a signal, guards brought the conspirators to their feet. They stood unsteadily, some still appearing shocked at having been caught. "These men," said Ibrahim, turning to the cameras, "will face public trial with full transparency. All evidence will be presented to our people. Foreign accounts will be frozen. And the world will witness that Africa is no longer slumbering. Africa is awakening, taking its destiny into its own hands." As the traitors were led away, Ibrahim's aides approached with urgently ringing phones. Requests for immediate meetings came pouring in from Western embassies, international organizations, and foreign journalists. But Ibrahim's attention remained fixed on his people. "This is merely the beginning," he said quietly to Captain Osei. "The real storm is about to break." He was right. Within hours, carefully worded statements began emerging from European capitals and Washington. They expressed concern for the situation, urged respect for human rights, and called for adherence to democratic processes. Ibrahim understood this diplomatic language perfectly. The real message was clear: release our assets or face economic sanctions, media attacks, and perhaps worse. But such threats were losing their effectiveness across Africa. The old playbook of intimidation was failing. 2 days later, Ibrahim addressed the nation. This time, he appeared before his people in full ceremonial uniform with medals displayed across his chest. The formal attire was unusual for him, as he typically preferred simple clothing, but today required the full authority of his office. He stood in Heroes Square, named after the freedom fighters who had sacrificed everything for independence. Thousands had gathered voluntarily, drawn by genuine interest in their nation's future. "My Wakiso brothers and sisters," he began, passion evident in his eyes, "I must ask you a fundamental question. Who rightfully owns Africa's wealth? Our uranium, our gold, our timber, our land? To whom do these treasures belong?" The crowd responded as one: "Ours! Our waters, our forests, our future. Who should control these? Ours!" The response was even louder, echoing off the buildings surrounding the square. Ibrahim spread his arms wide, symbolically embracing the crowd. He needed no prepared speech or teleprompter. These words came from his heart, formed over years of watching his people struggle under foreign influence. Then why do we remain hungry? Why do we remain poor? Why do others continue growing rich from our resources? A heavy silence fell over the square. Everyone understood these bitter truths. Mothers held children who should have been better nourished. Young men stood with calloused hands and empty pockets, despite working in uranium mines owned by foreign corporations. "Because," Ibrahim continued, his voice dropping to ensure the crowd leaned forward, listening intently, "some would sell us from within. Some would sacrifice their own brothers, their own mothers, their children's future to foreign powers." On massive screens erected around the square, images appeared. The arrested conspirators seized foreign currency, encrypted communications. "Look," said Ibrahim, pointing to the screens, "this is the face of betrayal. This is how the colonial mindset persists. While we sleep, they plot. While we work, they steal. While we strive for freedom, they report to their foreign masters." Then, copies of intelligence documents from European agencies appeared on screen. Operation names, code names, budgets, targets. The world watched in astonishment. Such evidence was rarely exposed so openly, especially by a sitting head of state. "How do you imagine we obtained these documents?" Ibrahim asked with a slight smile. "Because now we too have eyes, we too have ears, and most importantly, we too have minds." Laughter rippled through the crowd. The tension had eased somewhat. This wasn't merely defiance, it was empowerment. The knowledge that their government possessed sophisticated intelligence capabilities, that they weren't simply victims waiting to be saved or exploited. Ibrahim's voice grew stronger, reaching the farthest corners of the square. "The plotters now sit in our prisons, but their masters remain safe in their luxury offices. I send them this message. Your days are numbered. The era of exploiting Africa is ending. We are not our fathers. We are not afraid. We do not bend. And most critically, we do not sleep." When his speech concluded, not only Wakiso, but the entire continent resonated with his words. Messages of support flooded in from Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, even distant Morocco and South Africa. People took to the streets in capitals across Africa, celebrating Ibrahim's speech and demanding similar accountability from their own governments. In diplomatic circles, emergency meetings convened. The exposure of Western intelligence operations presented a significant crisis. The coup attempt had failed, but this represented only one battle. The real struggle was just beginning. The struggle against colonial legacy for a truly independent Africa. As night fell, Ibrahim returned to the presidential palace. Despite the victory, the weight of responsibility pressed more heavily than ever on his shoulders. The path ahead would be treacherous. Foreign powers would not simply accept this challenge to their influence. He walked through the corridors, nodding to guards who stood a little straighter, a little prouder after the day's events. In his office, he reviewed security reports and briefings from border outposts. The nation remained calm but vigilant. Ibrahim stood on the palace balcony that evening, gazing at the horizon. "Nyerere," he whispered, remembering the revolutionary leader. "Today, we took another step toward your vision." That night, the stars over Wakiso seemed unusually bright. In the days that followed, the international response intensified. Western media outlets began questioning Ibrahim's legitimacy, labeling him a military dictator and a threat to democracy. Economic advisories appeared, warning against investments in Wakiso. Behind closed doors, sanctions were being drafted. The French embassy reduced its staff, citing security concerns. The American ambassador requested an urgent meeting, but was informed the president was inspecting agricultural projects in rural regions, a polite diplomatic rejection. Within the country, however, something unprecedented was occurring. Citizens organized volunteer patrols around military installations, determined to protect their president. Women's groups established community watches. University students formed information brigades to counter foreign propaganda. In marketplaces and cafes, on buses, and in homes, people spoke openly about colonialism, economic exploitation, and sovereignty. Topics once discussed in whispers now filled public discourse. A week after the failed coup, Ibrahim made another bold move. He called a press conference, inviting journalists from around the world. Western reporters anticipated apologies, perhaps a softening of his position after days of international pressure. The press conference was held in the National Assembly building, a structure built during colonial times but now repurposed to serve African democracy. Foreign correspondents filed in, notebooks ready, cameras rolling. Instead of retreating, Ibrahim brought in boxes of evidence, financial records, communication logs, weapons with serial numbers traced to European manufacturers. He laid out, step by step, how the coup had been orchestrated from abroad. "These are not allegations," he said calmly. "These are facts, and facts cannot be sanctioned or embargoed." A BBC journalist raised her hand. Mr. President, Belgium has categorically denied any involvement in these supposed coup attempts. How do you respond? Ibrahim smiled slightly. Of course they deny it, but the signatures on these documents belong to officials in their government. The money trail leads to their banks. The weapons bear their manufacturing stamps. Should I believe their words or the evidence before me? The evidence was overwhelming. Photographs showed Western officials meeting with the conspirators. Bank transfers linked foreign governments to the coup attempt. The world watched in stunned silence as decades of covert operations were exposed in broad daylight. A CNN reporter asked, "Are you declaring yourself anti-Western, Mr. President? Is this a pivot toward other global powers?" "We are not anti-West," Ibrahim clarified. "We are pro-Africa. We seek partners, not masters, investors, not exploiters, friends, not colonial shadows." By the conclusion of the press conference, the narrative had shifted. Questions were now being directed at Western governments, not at Ibrahim. The Awakening. The aftermath transformed not just Wakiso, but sent ripples across the continent. Young leaders in neighboring countries began speaking more boldly. Citizens demanded transparency in mining contracts and foreign agreements. Ibrahim Traoré, once dismissed as just another military strongman, had become a symbol of a new African awakening. Not through grandiose speeches or revolutionary slogans, but through something more powerful: the simple act of exposing truth. In the weeks that followed, the economy faced challenges as predicted. Some foreign companies withdrew investments. Import costs rose as traditional trading partners imposed subtle barriers. But new partnerships formed as well. African nations increased trade with each other, reducing dependency on former colonial powers. Asian investors, less encumbered by colonial history, entered with fresh capital and technology. As for the conspirators, they faced justice as promised. Open trials, international observers, due process. The system Ibrahim was building wasn't founded on revenge, but on accountability. 3 months after the failed coup, Ibrahim visited a small village near the border with Chad. No entourage, no press, just a leader connecting with his people. Under the shade of an ancient baobab tree, village elders gathered to greet him. "My son," said an elderly woman, taking his hands in hers, "we have lived through many leaders, many promises, but you have brought us something different. You have brought us truth." Ibrahim sat with them, listening to their concerns. Water scarcity, school supplies, medical needs. These were the real issues, far from the geopolitical chess games played in foreign capitals. A young boy approached shyly, holding a handmade drawing. It showed Ibrahim standing tall, with the words "Wakiso Forever" written in careful letters beneath. "What is your name?" Ibrahim asked the child. "Patrice," the boy replied, "after Nyerere." That evening, as Ibrahim prepared to return to the capital, his phone rang. It was Captain Osei, his intelligence chief. "Mr. President, we've intercepted new communications. They haven't abandoned their efforts. New operatives have entered the country. New plans are being formulated." Ibrahim wasn't surprised. He knew this struggle would continue for years, perhaps decades. The forces arrayed against African sovereignty were patient and resourceful. "Keep watching, Osei. Keep listening, and most importantly, keep informing our people. An informed citizen is our greatest defense." As his convoy drove back through dusty roads, Ibrahim gazed out at the landscape, the fields where farmers worked, the schools where children learned, the markets where life continued in all its vibrancy. This was what he fought for: not power, not personal glory, but the simple right of his people to determine their own destiny. The battle against betrayal had been won. The war for true independence continued, and Ibrahim Traoré was ready.